Hey guys, this is Nique, and this is She Wolf Alchemy. And today we are talking about casual betrayals. And when we're saying casual betrayals, we're talking about those acts of disloyalty or acts that kind of hurt you, things that people do, but it feels like it's not a big enough deal to cause a scene, but they do have effects on our well being. And here's the thing, casual acts of betrayals can come from anybody. Sometimes it could come from family, sometimes it can come from friends, sometimes it can come from lovers, but it can also come from ourselves. So today we're going to talk about kind of how these things manifest and most importantly, what we can do to address them. So, Nique, what's the first thing that came to mind when I brought this subject to you?
I guess I never knew like it was a title for this or like I guess the definition. But once I started like reading into it and just like thinking more about it, I was like, oh, this is definitely something that I have gone through before, whether it be self, friends, family relationships, romantic relationships. It's definitely something that I personally have been through. So I was excited to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely the same thing. I feel like matter of fact, this weekend I was talking to you about like one with like family that was kind of like a casual betrayal where it felt like, as I was telling you about it over the weekend, like it felt stupid for me in the moment to bring it up because I could totally see somebody being like, why are you so hype about this? Like,
Mhm.
why is this such a thing to you? But it was like, it did hurt me, like, it was still hurt, like, even though in the grand scheme of things, it was something so little, and I think this is something we're gonna hit on a lot in this episode. Sometimes these little things, though, it's like, but this is your 8th millionth time doing this little thing. And now it feels weird to bringing it up because maybe it's so small and it's so casual that it feels like you're picking, but it's like, no, you are triggering me because this is like the 8th time that you've done this. This is triggering me because this is just reminding me of all the other little things that you've done over time that I kind of ignore because they're little. But now those little things are building from like a molehill into a mountain.
Mhm. When you let so many little things go by, they think like, well, that's their baseline. They don't really care. Or maybe they just never knew any of these things hurt you because you never spoke on it. Because like you said, it blows up. Like for me, it's like a volcano, like just erupting, erupting, erupting. And then my eruption is like everybody's like,
Yeah.
and don't know what to do. And then I'm like, well, I've been dealing with this for a long time for you to feel it. But I mean, that's not healthy for anybody. But I definitely just can agree because it is something that I I have worked through way better, but definitely something that I've been, yeah, that I have gone through in my past and sometimes still go through. Yeah. So
This is something I feel like has been, like, building up for me all 2024. All 2024, I feel like more so than I have in, like, at least the last 5 years, I have been kind of, like, being chill, being chill, being chill, and then going off on what seems to be little things to people, and then I have to lay out the whole thing because, yeah, this was one that definitely hits home for me. Um
mhm,
I think a lot of times in my personal life, I brush off so many things, and
mhm,
this year, yeah, you know for sure because you were the first person to point out to me like, "Hey, people don't know because you don't say anything." Um, and, like, this year, this it was like I feel like definitely in my personal life, I brush off a lot of little things because I'm just like, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, like,
mhm.
I didn't mean to do that. Or,
Yeah.
they have no idea how that's affecting me, and it again, like you said, it sometimes it just seems so little and trivial, and, like, this year, though, I just had thing after thing after thing where I had to be like, "Hey, so I do have feelings." I know the running joke is like, "Ha, ha, ha," for us to be letting things run off her shoulder, like, but no, things hurt. Things be hurt.
Mhm.
Listen, now when I go off, I feel crazy. Because to you, it was just like, "Hey, it was just this little nit. It was just this little nit." And for me, it was just like, "Nah, nah, because now I feel like you're doing that little knit on purpose. And kind of like you said,
Mhm.
over time, you start wondering, do you think this is my baseline? That this is now baseline bare minimal level of like how you can disrespect me.
You continue to do it, you know? Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, "No, she don't," like you said, then you just, like, you don't know that you are doing these things to your friends until they do speak up about it, which is good to speak up for yourself instead of letting little things, little things, little things. Because like we talked about, like, I'm like, "Some people may not know these things about you, sis, because you have not explained that." And
Gotta,
a lot of people are not as observant as I am, so
gotta
and I
under,
don't even catch everything.
gotta understand. I am. Nick is like, you know how in cartoons they have like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. Nick is like my little angel. It was just I was like, hey, before you go off, like, hey, maybe communication. You're so good at communication in your professional life. Maybe let's transfer that. Maybe you should do that. Maybe people don't know. I'm like, okay, I guess. So let's talk about the way how it can come off in a personal matter. Because I think when we're talking about this, your mind immediately goes to relationships, friendships, family,
Mhm,
so forth. But there's ways to casually betray yourself. Self betrayal and self abandonment is such a huge thing that I wish was talked about so much more.
mhm. So, yeah, this is like that's one of the bigger ones is betraying yourself, and you don't really think about it. I know I don't think about it until I think back like, "Hey, I didn't wanna do that. Hey, I didn't wanna go there." So, it looks like saying yes to things that you really don't wanna do just to keep the peace and just not saying no when you may need a self-care day and it's just not working for me anymore, and going through with those things, and then you go against stuff that may be like of value to you over and over and over again to keep the peace. And the more that you do this, it's just like it's such an act of betrayal and it can accommodate over time and keep building up and keep building up and you lose like your self-esteem. But we always tend to forget like self. And that could look like something as simple as saying yes to something you really want to say no to, or just being tired and your mind is changed and it's like, I don't really want to go, but I'm gonna still go, or doing things that's against your values to keep the peace, and just to keep everybody else happy around you. But these things can build up and build up and build up, and then you lose like yourself. You don't really know yourself, and it erodes over time, and you lose all like self-esteem, and you don't even know who your authentic self is because all this yeses and nos to things you don't want to do, and all of that, if you think about it, is definitely a betrayal of self. But
Yeah, I definitely think when you are constantly putting yourself in circumstances where you are kind of like being a yes person to everyone, it definitely falls in that category of self betrayal because I'm thinking about, like, how we show up authentically, and sometimes how we show up authentically is like, "Yeah, I don't wanna do that. I wanna sleep. I no lo y'all, I'm 33. I no longer wanna party 4 days in a row. I no longer I wanna go
mhm,
to museums. I wanna go to the park. I wanna go for
mhm,
a walk, y'all." And we're talking about casual betrayal. So it's these little things that it's like, okay, it's not a big deal. I'm gonna say yes because she really wanted me to. I'm gonna say yes because 3 weeks ago I said I was going to go. But over time, that stuff can build up to resentment as well. Um, I feel like for the most part, I'm usually good at saying no to things I don't want to.
mhm,
Um, but I do know that, like, I know I had a period in my life where I had a friend that was just going through a lot. Like, they were just going through a lot. And they didn't really have anybody on their side. They were really going through it alone. And so I was saying yes to a lot of things that I didn't want to because like it felt worth it because I love them. It felt worth it because I know they needed that. But it got to a point it was kinda exhausting me. It got to a point where I'm like, "Yo," it got to the point where, like, they would call and text, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, we just had a 4-hour conversation. They could possibly what else can be said? Like, this is our 8th, 4-hour conversation in 7 days. Like, what are we
mhm,
doing?" And it made me wanna withdraw for them, and it caused a lot of inner conflict for myself because I was like, "Well, you have to be there. You have to be who else do they have?" all this stuff. And I did not feel like my true self. I didn't feel like my true self because I again, I've said this on podcasts multiple times. I'm a person that needs a lot of isolation and so forth. I didn't get any. I was at my house all the time. We would talk on the phone all the time. We were texting all the time, showing up all the time. And like literally what I had to do is like have a conversation with them about boundaries where I was like, look, I am here for you. I'm trying to support you. We need to get a community around you though. I can't be your only support.
Yeah.
Also, no phone calls after 11. I I have to sleep. I got a job. I got a child. I got a child. I go to school in another county. I gotta wake up at 5 a.m. Like, we had to have the conversation, and, that probably saved our friendship. Like, cause it was getting me to the point where I was low-key getting angry because I'm like, common sense would say, "Call me at 3 a.m." It's not a good idea.
Common sense, not common to everybody, and I have
And well, look, this wasn't a matter about them not having common sense. They were just in a lot of pain. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, I get
yeah.
it. But like also we got you a therapist. And I will say that is another one for me too. Like I am a therapist. And I had this conversation with a friend recently because they were like, I'm the same everywhere I am, no matter what. And I was like, I'm not. I am not the same me at work because I'm at work. Like, and I
Mhm,
don't want to be the same person I'm at work when I'm home. Like my morals are the same. But, like, I want to take my therapy hat off, and I wanna be goofy because 'cause I'm a goofy person, and I want to be, chill and more laid back, and I also, like, at work, when I'm working with folks and they're like, "I miss him, I love him," I'm gonna let's problem solve, let's think about it, and Nique, you know firsthand, I'm not the person to come to when you miss somebody that, like, did something wrong. I
no.
I work at work, I'm great at it. With my personal friends, I yeah. Yeah, you know what I'm gonna say. Why did you call me for this?
And good point, like, going back to, like, the boundaries, I know, like, sometimes I had to be, like, with some friends we talked about it, it's like, we started to ask, like, "Do you have the emotional capability to listen right now?" And it's a yes or no, because if I'm already tired and drained, because I would do that, so I'll be there for everybody, be there for everybody, be there for everybody, but I never set up boundaries to be like, "It's just not a good day for any of that today." So we had to have talks about, like, how does that look? And it's
Mhm.
okay if I say not today. We will have a set time where I have to build up my feelings and my emotions to be open. Because if you're dumping and I can't even give you any feedback, it's not helping anybody anyways, unless they just want somebody to vent to, which is okay. But I still need emotional capability for a lot
Yeah.
of those things. I think it's because I am a empath
Mhm.
and because yeah, I am an empath and I just get overstimulated with a lot of interactions because I kind of am an introvert at heart for the
Yeah.
most part. And it's just noticing that about yourself and setting those boundaries and keeping them. But I had to learn that because yeah, I had to learn that.
Well, and that's one of the things I will say, if you are a person who is an empath or you are a person who is like the caring person, the caring friend, the mother friend, you're the go-to friend, you're the one that nurtures everybody, you need spaces where you do not have to show up as that. It is so important. And I'm somebody like that was my role since I was little. That was my role in my childhood. And I'm the youngest of my siblings. And
Mhm.
that was my role even as the youngest child. I was like the mama sister. I was like the friend that's like, okay, guys, the therapeutic friend. Um, I mean, therapeutic is not the right word, but I'm the person that's like, oh, she's gonna sit there and talk to me. She's gonna be the one that's nurturing. She's gonna be the one that pours into me. And as we're talking about self-betrayal, you need spaces, even if you're like, but that's my role. That's my role. You are so much more than that role. And if you do not allow yourself a space where other people pour into you, where you do not have to show up as the person that problem solves, where you don't have to show up as the person that take care of everybody, you will burn out.
Mhm. Fast too. Yeah,
Bad.
yeah.
When we're talking about self-betrayals, it can be those little things though where it was like, but it didn't align with what I really wanted. It aligned with what other people wanted for me. And even though they could mean well by one of those things, it's kind of killing me a little bit inside every day. It might just be a little, but that little bit builds up and builds up and builds up. And that
Mhm.
decision to keep saying yes to everybody can build up into chronic anxiety. That little I am trying to be everything to everyone except for self, I forgot to include myself in there, can build up to depression. It counts.
Yeah. I know, like, you called me out on that, like, just making sure that through all the things that I'm doing, make sure that I keep myself in the program. Like where you were saying, like some of your clients are going through things and they're like 70 years old and they're still like, I didn't do anything for me. Like you always remind me of the things that I have told you that I would love to do. And I appreciate that because I'm like, well, she's right. Let me try to get my life back together. I mean, it's not like a nagging, it's not like a mean, it's just like it is a reality. Like, are you really fulfilling your life in the way that you want to fulfill it? Because I know that you're not really happy in this situation. So I appreciate the reminders. I guess that's what my hope. I appreciate those reminders because like everybody depended on you as the youngest, but everybody depended on me as the oldest. So this is just ingrained in me all as well. Like I have to take care of this, and this, and be this, and this for this person. And it never left me time, as when I was younger, to fully understand what is it that I want? What is it that Johnny really wants? Just never got that chance. So as I get older, it's like I have to remind myself, and even you remind me, like, is that really what you want to do? And yeah, so I started to think about that more. So yeah,
Yeah, because you're really good about going into autopilot and
yeah.
stay in there. And usually how no, there's a couple different ways. I know we ain't got we don't have to mention them on the podcast. You know what they are. But one of the ways I know you're at autopilot is sometimes you'll get into like a space where you'll be like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I just know I feel something. And I'm like, okay, we are no longer grounded. We're no longer in touch with our feelings. And I'm like, okay, you're going back into autopilot. And I was like, and I think you just did it long enough that now you're starting to short circuit. It's really
Yeah.
bad.
The whole legendary though, like it just burns up because it's just like been doing so much. I think that's just always been me since a kid, and then even after losing my late fiance, it definitely was on autopilot, like being mom, like trying to figure out stuff for her, trying to do all these things, and just never took time to feel.
Yeah.
So then it's just like, oh, I have not been present with myself for maybe a year now. It can sometimes get that long. And it's like going back to like the self-betrayal. That's a whole lot of self-betrayal. And I think that's what I keep complaining about this year. It's like you have not taken a trip by yourself. And my body is because I have not had time to regroup this year. So just a little self-reflection here. But yeah.
Just just recognize some things that was not originally supposed to be a part of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it always happens. Go continue.
But, like, no, think about it. Every time you ignore your needs or you silence your voice, whether it's to please others or it's to keep the peace or it's to, yeah, keep the peace. Because I want to talk about that part. Y'all know on the podcast, I talk a lot about my flaws because I want to be very upfront and honest. I'm a flawed human being. This is an experiment. This is me learning the process, and we're not always going to get it perfect. And because I think sometimes when we're talking about doing better, we're talking about self-help, it comes off as like, oh, these perfect people with their perfect lives telling me how to get perfect. I'm a mess. Like, no, same. Same. I'm a Gemini. I'm definitely a mess. But like for me, one of the hard parts was like when I was doing a lot of healing, especially after my Saturn return. Oh my gosh, that was a and for my astrology girlies, my Saturn is in my first house. And so my Saturn return was all about self. And it was horrible. It was not a fun time. But like I tried to regroup and try to do this balancing period where I was like, okay, I have to change a lot of things about myself. There's a lot of things about myself that are toxic. And in doing that change, it was really hard for me to figure out what was toxic and what was boundaries because sometimes I was being toxic, but I also was keeping up boundaries and I confused it. And so there was a period of time where I let my boundaries go and I was just kind of letting a whole bunch of stuff that I normally would not let fly because I was still trying to sort it out. I was like, I want to be a healed version. And sometimes we confuse healed version with letting people walk over us. Sometimes we
Mhm.
confuse being a healed version with not speaking up for ourselves. That was something that was big for me. Ignoring my needs because I was like, well, oh, me would say this, and this. That's kind of blunt, maybe a little bit mean. And so I don't want to do that. So I guess I'll say nothing because I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know the words, and that can build up too. And I want to make sure we put that in there because I think sometimes when you're used to a certain level of toxicity and you're trying to go on a path of positivity, it is hard to figure out where that balance is. And you kind of got to do some trial and error. You kind of got to be like, okay, maybe this is not a big enough deal. And so I'm going to ignore this and I'm going to just keep pushing past. And then you realize a month later, like, got a whole bunch of resentment. It's not gonna work. Okay, now I know I gotta rein that thing in a little bit more. And that's okay. That is a part of the process. You're essentially, when you are ignoring your needs, you are essentially telling yourself that your feelings don't matter as much as somebody else's. And you are setting yourself up for so much failure when that is your inner monologue.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, while we're on that note of like ignoring your needs, because for some of us, it's not about like, I'm ignoring my needs to please others. Some of us, we're just literally used to people not meeting our needs. That is our norm. People didn't really meet our needs in childhood. The relationships that we've been in the past, our needs weren't really met. And so we just continue on. And that is also an act of self betrayal. If you are in relations with other people, whether that is friendship or a romantic relationship, not with y'all children, not with y'all children. Your children should not be meeting your needs. For all y'all deadbeat parents, children should not be meeting your needs. Why didn't they
No,
call
no,
you?
no.
Because they're 4 and you're a grown man and you should be calling them. Just wanna make that clear. But, when you're having in a relationship with other people, if there are needs in relations, and you should both be putting input into that. And that can be a part of casual betrayal as well as not holding people accountable and not making people do the work that is required for a healthy, balanced friendship, relationship, kinship. Oh, yeah.
So we were talking about like just like not holding others accountable when you're talking about self-betrayal of ourselves. But another one is just having self-betrayal, casual betrayal from friends or family. And these are the people that's supposed to be like the safe havens and people that has our best interests at heart. But yet sometimes they are the people who hurt us the most.
Yeah. And it's so funny that we actually are end up doing this one because this literally something I was working through this weekend. Literally something I was just working through.
Yes, yes, yes,
Uh,
yes.
and I do think it is important to recognize that friends and family should be safe places for us. And it's okay to recognize that as a betrayal, as a casual betrayal, if you want to say it as casual. Because I do think sometimes um, going back to like just getting things confused with like toxic positivity versus like just being toxic and trying to figure out how to balance on that spectrum. I think sometimes we don't, again, require a lot of people to be safe places. We're kind of just like, that's just how they are. And like, don't get me wrong, there's going to be certain things. I know for my friends, there are certain things there. They're like, That's for us. I don't touch on it. Mm, she ain't figured out with her therapist yet. That's what it is." And I feel that way about some of my friends and family too, where I'm like, "No, I just don't touch on that subject with them. That's that's how it's not a safe place to touch on that subject." They get very easily triggered, and that's okay. You can have those things in those places, but overall, in general, are you a safe place? Are they safe places for us? I don't want any friendships where I feel like I have to hide most of myself from you. Where
Mhm.
I feel like I have to be very strategic about our conversations. Some of that is hard for me because I just feel that way in life in general. But for the most part, I it should be a place where friendships and kinship should be a place where I can openly talk to you and I can trust that you have best intentions for me and I feel comfortable in our interactions.
Yeah, I agree. Or just feeling safe to make mistakes. Or if I'm going through something mental, like we all have mental health, like I had my shirt on that said mental health matters. So it's just like if I'm just going through a lot of anxiety and I'm acting weird, let's process it instead of like me feeling nervous to show this side because it's not like the perfect person. I just want to be around people that allow me to make mistakes and allow me to have those times and be there to be like to call me out on them and to talk it out with me rather than like, oh, I made this mistake. It's going to be something everybody's going to talk about forever and ever and ever. It's just like, that's not safe. And even though it may be something that even like making mistakes or say like, I got drunk one time. I made a fool of myself. It's just like just being able to make these mistakes and not thinking like it's something that's a judgment of character. It's like
Mhm.
I need a safe place for these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that could be a casual betrayal, like he, but just like checking in with your friends and stuff like that. It's just like I need those things, or if I don't feel safe to make mistakes, it's just like I don't like the walking on eggshells in friendships. So
Yeah. There was a video we posted a while ago on like our Instagram page, where this lady was talking. She was on like some late night show. I don't know any of the late night hosts or the show titles, but she was on some type of late night show.
me either.
And she was talking about how she had mentioned in the clip, she said, I wish we were quick to curiosity if somebody we know does something out of character instead of being quick to judgment. And I really, really like that. And I was like, okay, yes, that's how I want to explain it, like in relationships. If I am doing something that is off and you know me and you know me well, this is, if we're casual friends, casually dating, that's one thing. But someone that you know well, someone that you love, if I'm acting out of character, if I'm doing something that seems like, oh, girl, I would hope that my friends and loved ones would be more like, okay, this is out of character for her. Let me check on her. Let's see what's going on before
Mhm.
being like, well, she just like her daddy. And she was always a little weird anyway. Like, let's be curious before we be judgmental.
I definitely agree with that. And just holding a friend accountable and holding their hand to figure out what's going on,
Mhm.
especially like you said, if it's not their normal, instead of betraying them, like, oh, she must be going, this is just her way. It's not just her way. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because I know even going back to me being a kid, I had anxiety back then. Oh, that's just Janique. That's just Janique. She's that emotional. Yeah, I am. Let's talk about it. That's why I carried on to adulthood. Like, let's talk about it. So, yeah.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because yeah, no, and one of the things like I really try hard to practice with my daughter is like letting her know it's okay to make mistakes, letting her know it's okay to like let her know mommy makes mistakes and things like that. Because yeah, same. I was an extremely anxious child. I was like before we had the words and terminology, because we're both
Mhm.
millennials. Nobody was mentioning anxiety to us when we were kids. They was just like, she can't sit still. I don't know. She just mm, if a lot of stuff is going on, she just start acting up and go to her room. And
Mhm.
it was anxiety. Uh,
Or moody all the time. Like they'll say like she's moody all the time or she's crying all the time because I don't know how to process what's going on. Nobody's talking to me about it. So yeah,
Someone who
that.
actually does not know me very well actually said something to me like that. This was like a year or two ago where I was like complaining to, because the same thing, I was like, I always got the like Russ is moody. And I was like, Russ was overwhelmed. And also, like, I would just shut down and I would go to my room and I would just
Mhm.
go be alone or something. And it was like, when I'm thinking moody, I'm thinking more like temperamental or whatever, things like that. And so was talking about it. They're like, you are moody. You are moody. And I was like, give me an example. And their example was like, well, sometimes you just don't want to be bothered. And I was like, yes, that's who I am as a person. Sometimes I don't like being bothered. That's not being moody. That's literally sometimes I get overwhelmed and stuff is a lot. And so I need to retreat and I need to regather my strength. I don't want to sit there in the bullshit. I would very much like to be away from the bullshit because the bullshit is a lot. Anywho, I bring it up to say like yeah like you I was a very very anxious child, and I talked about this. I'm a pastor's kid and really felt like I was not allowed to make mistakes, and it's crazy because both of my parents, that Negro's still the same. My dad is still the same person. He's better, but oh gosh, the things he still very much need to go talk to a lady. Very much needs to talk to a lady. But my mom particularly is a lot different. She's changed a lot since she was in my childhood. And actually, I was talking to her about something this week, and I can't remember what we were talking about, but I had mentioned to her something from like childhood. And I was like, because y'all used to have a lot of weird rules for me. And she was like, I am sorry. I don't know. I was also learning and growing. I was like, I get it. I get it. You was a human being having your own experiences. My parents got really religious out of nowhere when I was a child. And that's very hard to adjust to as a child, to just
Really?
be like having Sundays. Yeah. I went from like us just like having Sundays. Like my parents, my mom and my biological dad divorced, and I lived with my dad for like 2 years. And like when they were still married, like we didn't go to church. We didn't, read the Bible. We didn't like it was just, regular. And I came back and my mom was hella religious. And all of a sudden,
I
hmm,
never knew that. I thought y'all was religious from the beginning to
no,
the end. I never
no,
knew it was just like a all of a sudden thing.
no.
Never knew
I came
that.
back and all of a sudden I couldn't do nothing on Sunday but go to church. My Wednesdays were full with church. I was asking questions about the Bible. I had to read this big book. I didn't want to read the damn book. Like it just came out of nowhere. And then like it became a thing, like until I was grown. And now my dad, anyways, we're not gonna get into that because I still love him very much. And I don't want him to cuss me out when he hear the podcast. But but like, yeah, and it was like a thing. And like one, that was a big shock to me because I was just like, what are all these new rules? But yeah, because of that, like I was just very, very anxious. Because it was just all of a sudden a lot of like expectations of me. And it's one of the things I feel like I really carry with me as a parent now. Because I know how that manifests for me in several areas of my life. And so like now I'm so big on like even my daughter is, and I'm so sorry to her teacher because again, my baby marched to be her own little drummer. It's so hard. Matter of fact, the other day she was in trouble at school because the teacher was reading a book that we have at home that I already read to her. And so like they were like on the carpet in circle time. And she got up and went to her seat. And the teacher was like, hey, my daughter's name was like, come back. And she was like, nah, I'm good. And then she was like, no, come back. She was like, I already read the story. Cause like, I guess their thing is like, they read this, she reads them the story, then they have to answer these questions. She's like, I already know the answers to the questions. Y'all sit there. I'll be fine. And she went and got her iPad. My daughter is definitely somebody like, if it doesn't make, you have to make it make sense to her. You have to make it make sense. When something doesn't make sense to her, and apparently they went through a back and forth where the teacher was like, I don't care if you already read it, sit here and read. And my daughter was like, why? And she's like, well, because it's reading time. She's like, but I've already read it. She's like, but your classmates haven't. And she was my understanding, and she was like, okay, then they should sit there. Like it was the thing. It was the thing. That child, look, the patience that is required to raise a strong woman, because she has great characteristics for a grown woman. And I was actually just telling this to my dad that like, because he was like, how's my grandbaby doing? I was like, she's good. And he was like, why are you saying like that? I was like, she's just a lot like me. He was like, that's great. You're a great person. I was like, yeah, but like she's a lot like 33-year-old me, and she's 7. She doesn't have the expertise and experience to like let her know when she needs to like pull back a little, when she needs to like, hey, tone it down, bring it up. Like, no. So she's just 33-year-old Rest in a 7-year-old's body. And it's a lot to
Mhm.
parent. It's so much to
Mhm.
parent. My parents weren't parenting
Mhm.
this version of me. They were parenting a very anxious version that just wanted everyone to talk in very calm voices, one at a time, and leave her alone. That's who my parents parented.
Mhm.
This is the result of that. Um, but anyway, I brought it up to say though, no, because of that, and I was saying sorry to her teachers because I'm trying to very much be a child that is good to teach, but also still be her own independent self. And it's very hard to find that balance, y'all. But like I am big on letting her know like it's okay to make mistakes. So like when she was telling me that, I was just like trying to balance, like, hey, you can't do that. sit your little behind down. But like, I also,
Mhm.
because like she takes it really serious, like when I'm telling her no, or because she doesn't get whoopings. She's not someone I like you really yell at or anything like that. Them first couple years, that's different. I got patience now. But like she's not. And so like when I do get like upset, she takes it like very, very seriously and she's very sensitive. And so I try to do a lot of like, hey, it's okay. It made sense that you shouldn't have to sit there because you read the book and she said, sit here so you can listen. You're like, oh, I don't need to listen. I know. Mommy understands why you felt that way. But, but, and I think it's important again to like practice those moments. I'm using my child as an example, but also with others where like it's okay that you just showed up as a flawed human being. I do not love you any less for that. I am not holding my love from you because of that.
Mhm. And just continue to reassure that, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And like your child is a good example because that's a good example because he's children. And my child got a smart mouth, and I had to. I don't whoop either, but I definitely had to go old school. But then I should have been like, you should just explain that to her. Like that's not how you talk. I don't know. But the sis was like, I called her to come in the kitchen, and
Mhm.
she said, I'm hungry. She was like, Mommy, please do not come back in the kitchen unless the food is ready. What? Do you know how to
Why
get
they're
down?
best friends. This is why they're best friends.
Exactly. Like when you were saying that, I was like, that's something Journey
Yeah.
would do. And I definitely told her, like, you don't talk to me that way. And then she's just as sensitive as yours. So she just ran off, stomping off and sad and like the biggest. And I was like, well, maybe I should have said it a different way. You know? I was like, that was disrespectful. I don't care. Like that was disrespectful. I understand. But you can't just be I understand where you're coming from, sis. But back in the day, that wouldn't flow.
Oh, at all, at all. It's hard being a first generation soft parent.
Mhm. Yes.
It is so freaking hard. Look, I try so very hard, like you said, to balance it, but like I definitely put some old school bass in my voice because sometimes the little person be trying me.
Exactly.
Oh gosh.
Um,
But going back to casual betrayals, like it can look very different. I think also when we're talking about like with families, because it can be more complicated. It is harder to just dismiss family and cut off family. And especially for little casual type of things, sometimes it can be like, again, you have parents that were just very dismissive of your feelings, or maybe you have a sibling that like constantly undermines you. A lot of times when we're talking about families, these casual betrayals are like long standing. These are betrayals that like didn't happen over the course of like 3 years. These are like over the course of 35. And walking away, especially when it feels like it's not that big of a deal, doesn't really feel like it's an option. And this is where I think we have to come in when it comes to setting boundaries and communicating clearly what our needs are, what our standards are, even if it feels like, oh, I don't know how they're going to take this. They're not used to strong me. They're not used to communication me. They're not used to boundary me. I
mhm.
recently had a conversation with a family member where I was triggered. I was really, really triggered. We were talking, and so like I tried not to get into it, and but they kept doing it. And I was making a particular point, and I was just using it as an analogy for something else that like had happened in our lives. And I was like, well, let's look at it as this. And they were really dismissive and they were just like, okay, well, whatever. And I was like, well, no, not whatever. And I was getting mad because I was kind of using an analogy of something that had happened to them. And I was like, this is the same thing. Like, this is the same, this beef is the same thing. Like, you remember when all these people wrongly turned on you, people that you love, people that you helped, people that were there for you, people that supported you. And I was like, and then they did it on lies. And you remember like how it destroyed, like, it destroyed your career for a moment there. You remember how blah, blah, blah. And anyways, I was like talking about this and they were just like, okay, ha, 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 whatever. And they were like completely dismissive. And I got really angry and really like charged up. And I was like really confused why I was so angry and why I was so charged up. And then they kept wanting to talk to me about it. They kept trying to make like jokes about something that I took very, very seriously. And I was getting mad and I was getting angry. And I was like, okay, let's just drop the subject. And they wouldn't drop the subject and they kept doing it. And then they started doing something to kind of taunt me. And I had to say to them, because they kept taunting me and I wanted to let it go. And I was like, let's just not. Like we can just not have this conversation anymore. It's getting uncomfortable. And they were like, oh, why can't I ever talk about my things? I can never talk about my things for you. You always setting up your little boundaries and stuff. And I told them because it's another reminder that my whole life you have never cared about my emotional safety, and that whenever I express discomfort to you, you you have always put me in a position where if my emotional discomfort doesn't make sense to you, then you dismiss it. And I
Mhm.
was said, and I have never done that to you. I have always been, when something makes you uncomfortable, I immediately stop because it doesn't matter the reason, because I love you. Because I love you, that's enough reason for me to not keep engaging. I was like, but this thing is it's not even about this conversation that we're having. I was like, but this was just another reminder to me, like something that I kind of forgot about for a while, that I have to plead my case for you to be a safe place for me. You refuse to just be an emotionally safe place for me as your natural state of being.
Mhm.
And we kind of had to like take a break from each other. I don't think they were expecting that from me. And I wasn't expecting that to go that way. And also it completely kept me off guard. And kind of like we said earlier, when it comes to like casual betrayals with family, and you might be saying that's not a casual betrayal, but the big conversation was a casual betrayal. Like the conversation that we had, it was just more like I was annoyed and I kept saying like I don't want to talk about it, and it kept like pushing my buttons on it, even though like they could tell I was visibly getting very angry. I was visibly being very hyped up, and but it touched on something so much deeper because it was again a little string of lots of times this has happened, and yes, some of the times it has been bigger things, but other times it had been little things where it was just like, hey, can you not play that song? I just have it associated really, really bad memory, and then being like, but this is my jam, and turning it up louder.
Yeah.
It's little things like that that over time
Mhm.
it can build up. And I love this person very much. Like I have no plans on being like, and cut them off, and I'm never gonna talk to them again. And that's what I think makes those casual betrayals so hard with family.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be, can it even be even more easier with friends? Not like super easy, but easier with friends because like family is supposed to be your core. Um, for me, it would be harder for me to cut off family members instead of friends.
Mhm,
But it's still hard for me with friends too. But it's just like I trust you. Unless you like did something to me that harmed like my mind, my body, my soul, something like that. Like really, really hard. It's like, yeah, it's chop time. But it's
mhm.
just like it's just so hard to cut them loose. So it's just like all we can do is continue to push those boundaries, continue to push those boundaries, and sometimes giving them grace until they understand where you're coming from. But then sometimes they just don't understand, so you have to go back to your boundaries
Yeah,
and love them from a distance, or love them in a different way. I guess
yeah.
makes
And
sense.
sometimes you don't want to cut them off. Sometimes it's just like
No.
I'm not even wanting to go there because I'm a person. It
Hmm.
is very easy for me to cut people off. I have an ex father. I have an ex uncle that's gonna be at my house that I fully plan to ignore on Friday.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
I have a couple ex family members. It's not hard at all, but sometimes it's like okay, but I don't want that to be the only response. So then, what are my
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
options?
Mhm.
Um, and again, it can be like for me and this person, it was communicating clearly what I felt and my needs and why this little thing actually was a big thing and what it was triggering upon. And then also that boundaries. Again, one of the things they said to me was like, you got all these boundaries now. Because again, in the past with family, I didn't have boundaries. I would just shut down. And I thought that was a boundary, but it wasn't because then
Mhm.
it just built up this, well, rest can take anything because I don't know, you start doing stuff and she'll just either stop coming around, won't show up, or she'll just sit there and then she stares off into space and we don't know what's happening, but it's fine. And and so for me, it was like learning how to set boundaries. And sometimes it is having those hard conversations. I have had hard conversations with siblings. I've had hard conversations with my parents. I have had hard conversations with cousins. And you're right, it can be hard, especially parents. It can be really hard to say to them, hey, you did this thing 20 years ago and it still haunts me. Because,
Mhm.
like, overall, you're a great parent, not you, Jimmy, but other parents. Overall, you're a great parent. And but I get it. You were 30 something. Yeah, my parents were old parents. You were 40 something and you didn't understand and you were still going through life and you didn't know this was going to impact me this way. You didn't know I was paying attention in the background. You didn't know I took that seriously. I totally get that. However, now I'm 33 and you're still doing it and it's becoming a bigger problem. So hey, we got to talk about it. And it's hard and it's uncomfortable, and I think I talked about this last episode. Like, I had a conversation with my dad last year where I had to tell him like how much he impact my ability to trust and love, how much he impact
Mhm.
my ability to feel comfortable trusting men, how much he impact my ability to feel like love is something that lasts, that love is real. Just having real conversations with him about like, hey, you being a great dad, but a horrible husband, there were other casualties besides your wife. And I straight up told that man, you ruin every woman who's been in your life, and that includes me. You up here thinking about ex-wives and stuff. What about me? And
Mhm.
that was incredibly hard to say because I still have so much love for my dad, and I still have a little bit of me that knows he's a man child, but also still thinks of him as Superman. And it's hard
Yeah.
to tell Superman, hey, when you threw that car to hit the villain, you hit my house. Let's talk about that. It's hard to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going back to like when you were saying like you didn't have we didn't have a chance to have boundaries as kids. Like what is boundaries? No, everything. Like we couldn't close our door. We couldn't do nothing.
Girl,
We just got their
girl.
doors off hinges. So
Look,
it's
you know I
like
was going there. You know I was going there. And it's still so freaking triggering to me. My mom think it's a joke. Every now and then she'll bring it up.
yeah.
I was in a house with 7 boys, and so I used to lock my door. And not because like, anything super negative, but it was just like, "Well, stop giving my perfumes to your little girlfriend." Like it was just like, why are y'all using my deodorant just because y'all ran out? Like thing that happens when you live with boys. And I would lock my door, and my mom would get mad because she would just want to burst in my door because she was like, "It's my house. All these rooms is my room. You ain't got no room." And so one day she finally got tired because I'd be like, okay, then I immediately lock it after. And I came home and the she had unhinged my door. Like she took my entire door down. And that is the first and probably only time as a child my parents ever see me be unhinged, because I had a full break. Like I threw my shoes and I just start going off. Like my parents still to this day, they laugh about it and make fun of it, and they were like, "We didn't know, we thought you was possessed," because like I had a whole breakdown in the middle floor. But to me, I was like, "Y'all had me in a house with 7 boys, and my room was my only space." And again, I'm a person who needs a lot of isolation to like function properly, and like that was the only space I had where I could just be alone and you took that from me because you wanted to be able to invade my
Mhm.
privacy at any time that you
Yeah.
wanted. Like that just doesn't make sense.
At all. But that's what I'm saying. We didn't have any types of boundaries then. So it's just like they're still confused about why are you doing all these boundaries? But we're adults now. We can say
Yeah.
yes or no, or this is hurting us. Like we can say all those things that they didn't give us the grace and space to do it back then. So it's still kind of confusing to them today. Like what is it really? What really is? What is a boundary? I
Yeah.
don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about with this boundary stuff because we didn't have options to even make decisions as a child. So yeah. So, yeah.
Look, me and you talked about this before of like going out and becoming an adult and like having to make decisions and having like paralysis because it's like I didn't this is new for me. I didn't know there was options. I didn't
No.
I can make multiple options. Let me go make a couple wrong ones. Like it was
Yes.
hard.
Yes, yes, yes. So, yeah.
But yeah, setting those boundaries, even as an adult now, even though it's hard, even as discussion, here's the thing, they can't whoop you now. They can't what they gonna do? They gonna take your phone, you pay for that bill. What they gonna
Mhm.
do? They gonna tell everybody in their family, she's starting to get a mouth on her. She's starting to be disrespectful. She was those are her sisters. She was gonna tell them stuff about you anyway. It's fine. Set the boundaries.
Exactly, exactly. And continue, Stefan.
Yeah. And you would be surprised like how much like when my mom has been good for the most part when it comes to me setting boundaries with certain things. Like my mom and my stepdad got divorced like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I had to set a boundary with both of them. I don't want to hear y'all talk about the other. I am not
Mhm.
your safe place to discuss that. Y'all got siblings and friends. I
Mhm.
love my mama more than anything in the world. And I told it to my dad too. But like I had to tell both of them, like, I don't wanna be a part of this. Like I don't want to be anything. And I was really scared to have that conversation. And I had it and it was hard and it was difficult. With both of them, it was hard and it was difficult. And it definitely was some uncomfortable silences. There was some uncomfortable remarks. But after I did that, both of them eventually respected it. And they did. And then they would catch themselves and they'd be like, yeah, because yo trifling ass. Well, never mind. Never mind. How was work, baby? And it would work.
Oh, yeah, but at least they're like listening and trying to respect your boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, start communicating your needs, start communicating what your boundaries are and stick to them. That is the biggest thing I think with families. A lot of times we set boundaries and it's these folks that we have to see for some of us a lot all the time. And it's hard, especially if they keep messing up with the boundaries. So it just feels
Mhm.
easier to be like, well, whatever, stick through 'em. When you say, well, whatever, you are training that person that they are the exception to the rules around your emotional safety.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we discuss friends, we discuss family. I think we discuss self. So let's bring it on home with lovers because I think this is a place where, yeah, there's lots of little casual betrayals and stuff that goes on that you like, I love this man. I don't want to keep nagging, or I love this woman. It's too small. I don't want to fight it every day at 8 a.m. Let me sweep it under the rug. And I get choosing your battles, but there are some battles that if you keep sweeping under the rug leads to all out wars. And it's important for you to recognize what those ones are for yourself and just address them before it comes to that. And when I'm thinking about casual betrayals in like romantic relationships, I'm thinking really more so about those like micro like infidelities and subtle dismissals that can like really erode the foundation of one's relationship. What I'm talking about is like I mean, yeah, I was texting my ex at 2 a.m., but like it was a regular conversation. And like, I mean, it's not like we had plans to meet up. It's not like little things like that. And I'm not talking about liking pictures, y'all. I know y'all want to break up or get mad and go off on liking pictures. And look, that's on you and yours, on y'all relationships. I just feel like that's one hell of a small ass hill to die on.
I think one is like a casual dismissal is like them just putting their wants and needs before yours, and then it's like, okay, it's my turn to talk, my turn, and it's just like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, and then go right back into theirs, and it's just like, okay, I'm here. Even though they might not notice that's what they're doing, it definitely is casually pushed to the side, and you're left like depleted. It
Yeah.
goes back to the boundaries, and it goes back to speaking up. But I know that is one of the big ones, or just dismissing your feelings when you tell them that it does hurt me. I
Mhm,
know like it was a time where I had to be like, okay, let's go back. Like, we're
mhm,
not gonna dismiss that. You kind of went over the fact that this hurt me. And that's
mhm,
not like push that to the side. Let's address that. It's no buts about it. It's not like, yeah, I did this, but I said, no, let's address that hurt my feelings. But it took me a while to get there to even speak up to say those things. But it was me calling him out on the casual betrayal because it's just like, yeah, but that's just you. It's just like, no, we're
mhm.
gonna we're gonna address that. We're gonna
Yeah.
sit in those feelings. You're gonna sit in these feelings with me. So yeah,
My
I think that's a
feelings are
big one.
important. Let's address
Yeah,
the feelings.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know for me, it was more so being a person who felt like I secure my own needs, I take care of my own needs, and so not really making people have to put forth emotional effort or
Hmm.
emotional consideration for me. Again, this is something I struggle with family, friends, lovers all around. But I know that was something that came up for me a couple of times where I was like, yeah, I need to do something about that of like, I am your emotional safe space, but you're not mine. Like you come
Yeah.
to me and talk to me about everything, and you come to me and you get to walk away feeling relieved, and you get to like, oh, she's my peace. Oh, girl, is he your peace? Nah. And I know with me, like the reoccurring thing that kept happening, it was like, okay, when I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna open up and I'm gonna talk about my things, kind of like you said of like, oh yeah, 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 and then changing the topic back to them and not really putting forth the same type of effort and consideration I felt like I put forth when it came to their issues or their things or their feelings or things that they wanted to talk about. It was kind of like in that, like, yeah, yeah, I understand. Cause like when it happened to me, it's my grandmama. And now all of a sudden I'm consoling you, even though I was the one
And
who
have
was
to
like,
give them a
I'm
that.
going, yeah, I'm the one who's like, I'm going through this thing. I'm from pain. And now somehow I end up consoling you throughout the rest of the conversation. And I didn't recognize how much that was affecting me. Like, I really did not recognize how much that was affecting me until like, even after like I did like a whole 2 years of really like sitting with myself and making myself learn how to feel my feelings, learn how to ground myself, learn how to process my feelings, learn how to do all the things I paid that university to teach me how to do for other people. I started doing utilizing it on myself. And I was dating this guy afterwards, and the cycle was repeating itself. And he was a great guy. He was a good guy. He was in therapy and everything. And I really struggled with it because I was like, dang, I really, really like him. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this out. And I did. And I was like, I'm gonna try to talk about my feelings and I'm gonna try blah blah blah. And I kept feeling like I got railroaded. Like I would bring up my stuff and somehow we still ended up talking about him and his feelings and how when that happened to him, how he handled it. And now he realized that still hurts. And now he needs me to help him process his hurt about this thing that happened to him 18 years ago. And like,
Uh, it's sidebar. I
mhm,
feel like I don't know if it's just because we're social workers or just because we're just a caretaker spirit. But it's just like, why does that always happen? Like, why do I
yeah.
always have to be a social worker for you? And you had to be a whole therapist. I'm like, I didn't even do therapy a long time, but I feel like I'm being a therapist too. Like, why? Why?
I don't do the apps anymore, but like when I did used to do the apps, I used to put that in there. Like, I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist. Like that used to
Mm,
be on my profile because I was like, I am so tired of this like consistently happen. And it still happened. And I get good
yeah.
at catching it and be like, no. But with this
Hmm.
person, like it was the first time I did it in a healed way. Like it's the first time after I recognized it. I'm like, I'm going to speak up on my needs. I'm going to communicate about my feelings. I am going to be an advocate. I am not going to be big on secrecy about myself and the craziness in relationships. I'm going to be upfront and honest. I'm going to tell them about it. Um, and so, but it was like the first time I had like tried that when I had like already did like a lot of work on myself. And I was pissed off because I was like, it's not supposed to happen. It's a work
Hmm.
supposed to
Hmm.
be rewarded with a person who just knows how to act. And that's not how it works at all, guys. It's not. But I did it and it happened again. And I explained myself. And I remember like bringing it up, like, hey, this is the issue I'm having. Um, when it comes to like emotional safety, it feels very one-sided. And then I gave him examples and he was like, okay, I understand. And then he was great for all of 2 weeks. And then immediately it started back again. And before that moment, I didn't really recognize how big of a thing it was because in the past, I would have just been like, oh, that's men. They're not safe spaces. Or I just would have
Hmm.
been like, I just would have used that to affirm my belief of like, and this is why you don't reveal yourself to folks. This is why you have to deal with your emotions. Like that was a reoccurring schema for me. That was a reoccurring belief for myself is that yes, safety, emotional safety is for other people. It's not for you. Yes, promote it for others because it can happen for them, but not you. You are alone in this thing. This is your own special hell that you have to deal with. And so when I was like, no, in the past, I would just add it to that pile. Like, yes, this reaffirms that. And this is why I need to keep this in mind. But after I had went through all of that and was really trying to heal and was really trying to be a better and different type of person, show up differently in relationships and had that happen, I realized for me, like, no, that is a deal breaker.
Hmm.
I still keep that with me now. It is a deal breaker for me if I feel like the emotional safety part of our relationship is one-sided. It's only for you. And before it was something I would just sweep under the rug and I would just kind of be like, he doesn't have emotional intelligence. That's fine. It's not. You
Yeah.
also serve, and those are again just these little betrayals. And you're like, well, is that really a betrayal? It is because you told me you were going to be my safe place. And then when I needed you to be safe, you took it away from me.
Hmm.
And you did it
Hmm.
casually. It wasn't like you were mean about it. It wasn't you're like, ha ha ha, I'm taunting you with my no, because he was very nice about it. He was very much, oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying. It's just, I'm having a lot of stuff too, and I'm processing and I want to say quickly because I know that's how people communicate. A lot of times when we're talking to people and they went through something that we went to, the way that we try to communicate and bond to show empathy is by telling them our story, by saying, I understand you because I too went through this. And that's how we try to bond. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to make sure you get back to their story and their things.
Mm-hmm.
Make your story brief. And if
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like you can say, like, I went through that too. It made me feel this way. How are you feeling about it? Did it
Mhm.
affect you in this way? But now, like, it affected me this way. So I did this, this, and this, and so you should do this, this, and this, and this. And then it's like we don't even know what we talk about anymore. So I think you should just still check in with
Girl,
it.
it would have been great if even if they gave suggestions, because I'm really good at
Yeah.
throwing away people's suggestions. So that would have been great. But that was even happening. It was just like, and this is how it happened to me and my mother. And you know what? And next thing you know, we are on a 2 hour conversation about how
And
his
you're
mother
not,
really didn't love him. Because I attract men with mother issues. His
yeah.
mother really didn't love him. And now it's like, all right, I gotta put my daughter to bed.
Our
So I
minds
guess
can't get over their exes. Our mind takes over your exes. And you always have the mama issues. Mine is just, she hurt me. Nigga, it's a new day.
yes, yours is definitely men who are still not over their exes. Mine are men who
Oh,
mother issues, who are trying to work out their mother issues through me.
yes.
And I'm not a great candidate for that. Like, if anything, I feel like I make it worse.
Yes.
But yeah, those are like ways that it can like you can have those like casual trails in relationships, like not showing up for you, having me believe that you will show up for me, and yet every time I need you to, you pulling the rug from underneath me.
Yeah, yeah.
So those can be examples of those casual betrayals as
Hmm.
well in romantic relationships. So I think when we're talking about like again, like okay, then like how are we healing these? How are we addressing them? And I think it doesn't matter if we're talking about casual of betrayals from others, from ourselves. The first thing you got to do is acknowledge it. Pretending that it's not there or it doesn't hurt you only allows the wound to fester and grow bigger and bigger. Again, for some people, they can let that stuff happen for 10 years before you explode. Or maybe you never explode. It just slowly eats away at your self-esteem. It just
Hmm.
slowly eats away at your belief that you are as important and valued to that person. It can slowly eat away at you wanting to be around them. It's just building up your resentment. You now have this like secret resentment where you're like, why is it sometimes you randomly cross my mind? I go, ugh. Either way, by not acknowledging it, you're building it up. And I want to be clear here. We're not saying that every little slight has to be considered something that needs to be addressed and needs to be focused on. We're talking about, again, how much is this affecting you, affecting your life? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about casual betrayals. How much of it is it affecting your life? If it's just like his breath be stinking, and that's a betrayal on my nostrils. I feel like he should do better. Is that really a casual betrayal? Or is it just sometimes when y'all wake up in the morning, can you just like not roll over and talk to him first thing? Can he brush his teeth? How much is it affecting you? So let's look at the things that are actually like, no, over time, it's small, but it actually is really making a big impact on me. Those are the ones we're going to talk about. So acknowledging what those ones are and not ignoring them.
The next one is setting boundaries. We've been talking about that the whole time, but it's just about first setting those boundaries both for yourself and for others. And this might, like we said earlier, just by saying no or just having those difficult conversations about this, and it's hurting me, making sure that you're heard and hearing them out and talking through it. And going back to even like with yourself, setting boundaries for yourself, like the last time I did this really hurt me. I don't want to betray myself in that way again. So I'm going to stand up and not do that again or speak up for myself. So it's just about the boundary working, which is very hard.
Mhm.
I know for me, it took me a while to even learn to even talk about things. And then when you talk about things, if the person is safe, because these people that decided to talk on these things were safe, it was such an easy and refreshing conversation. I have had these hard conversations with friends. I have had these hard conversations with romantic partners. I don't think I have had them as much with family members, so
No,
we got to
no,
work up to that. I don't think I had ever
no.
one-on-one with the direct person that has hurt me with other people, but
Yeah,
not the direct person that's hurt me. So that's something I have to work up to. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there
we're
before I
rooting
turn
for you.
40. But
Not before I turn 40.
I'll be 40 and just like cussing everybody like it's come time. The volcano has erupted. But anyways, you don't want to get there. Set those
Like, woman?
oh my goodness. So set those boundaries and have those with yourself. And the ones that mean the most to you and just letting know that things hurt you. Instead of harboring it in your chest and your body, it's just breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down. So just having those conversations, hard conversations, setting those boundaries. So the next one is forgiveness. And this doesn't mean just letting people keep disrespecting you over and over and over. You have those talks and you can forgive the action to move on. So not let it harbor in you. Because sometimes I can forgive, but sometimes I have that little resentment deep, deep down in there. So it's just like letting it go. And so it won't affect you or won't affect because sometimes it's not affecting them at all. Again, going back to boundaries, it's affecting you. So just having that forgiveness to let it go and just so you can move forward in whatever way that looks
Yeah.
for you.
And again, I'm me and forgiveness aren't on the same page yet. It's not an area. I gotta be honest with y'all. I'm not even working on it. I'm not. That's just not a part of my journey right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe,
Maybe
you know,
later.
maybe
Maybe
later,
when
maybe
you're
later.
40. Maybe when you're
But yeah, yeah. Because because when I think forgiveness, whenever I hear people do the argument for forgiveness, for me personally, like when people are like, you gotta learn to forgive, I'm like, no. It's always like, because you're holding on to it, and I don't hold on it to it. Like I a lot of times one have horrible memory. So as long as it's not actively happening, a lot of times I don't really think too much about it.
Mhm,
But I think that goes back to the last part of your statement, which is that releasing part. I am big on the releasing part. Like not holding it with you, not carrying it with you, not sitting up in your room secretly thinking about it. Not, that part I do believe in. I am big on
mhm,
also releasing. And once you save your peace, release it. And sometimes releasing it does mean you have to release the person. Because maybe you
mhm,
said your piece, you set your boundaries, you acknowledge a thing, you're bringing it up, and they're like, ha, no, that seems like a personal issue. Cool. You can just release them. You don't have to work through things with people. I want to say that as well. You do not have to work through things with people who don't want to work through things, especially some of those friendships, especially some of those relationships. We're like, but this is going to be my husband. Okay. Okay. Even sometimes some of those family members, um, once you say your piece, you can release the anger. And sometimes that looks like we set our piece. I set my boundary. They agreed upon it. I can see they're working. They're not perfect. They're trying. But I am now going to release some of that anger from the past because we have discussed it. I am happy with the resolution. I see that they're working for it. And I don't need to just secretly harbor this anger for me. So that part I do believe in. Release it. Don't hold it. You don't need to carry that with you every day. It's such a heavy thing to carry. And again, a lot of times if you're a person that holds it, you're thinking about it, you're letting it manifest, you're letting it kind of take you down randomly on a Tuesday, and
mhm.
they living their life. So if you can forgive, forgive. But if you can't forgive, at least learn to release.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And, and the last thing I think really helps with this is learning how to rebuild that relationship afterwards. And that can look like rebuilding trust, and that can be rebuilding trust in yourself, or it can be rebuilding trust in those relationships. And this is going to take time. This is going to take practice. This is going to take a commitment to being open. This is going to take an understanding of that they're also flawed. And so they might do it really great for a month and then they slide off a little bit. You gotta give them a nudge and remind them, hey, I meant it when I said this is my boundary. And doing that is also going to keep requiring that open communication. Healing is not linear. And it's okay that if I take 2 steps forward and I took a little step back, but then I took 3 steps forward, but then I just kind of stayed at that third step and didn't take any more for a little bit. That is what healing looks like. It's not always as clear cut. It's one of the things I hated about writing papers in grad school and in school in general, especially when I was going to school to pursue therapy. Um, you get these textbooks and it's like, okay, how to treat bipolar disorder, whatever, how should you start off using CBT? Do the triangle. And you write these paper and it's like, because you do this and then you do that. And if you do that, they're healed. They can live their life. In the real world, that's not how it works. And I think because so many times, especially in school, I feel like we practice like, and then you do this, 2 + 2, and you get 4. And then we see it in movies. Oh my gosh, they were hurt. And then she said, I need you to be a better man. He became a better man. They lived happily ever after. But the truth of the matter is, usually that's not how it works. It's going to take practice. It's going to take patience. And there is a point where you can say, enough. We've tried this and it's not working, and take a step back. But that should not be your first conclusion after the first mistake. People are flawed. And if the person is trying and they're putting in their effort, it can be really worthwhile for you to try to be patient and work with them as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a famous quote about death by a thousand cuts. And I feel like when we're talking about casual betrayals, whether it's from ourselves, our family, or lovers, that's what it feels like, death by a thousand cuts. They're little, they're paper cuts, they're annoying, but like you don't really get a band aid for a paper cut. It's just a paper cut, but it hurts. It
Like,
stings a
yeah.
bit. It's really, really annoying. Usually, for the next week after, you are very careful about how you separate the papers and how you turn the pages of books because you still remember that sting. And when you keep having multiple things, you keep having those multiple paper cuts and multiple paper cuts and multiple paper over time, it's no longer a paper cut. That's now an open wound. If you keep cutting your finger in that same spot over and over, yeah, it was just a little paper cut at once, but you keep slicing, that is now an open wound that can get infested. And I think we need to remember that when we're talking about casual betrayals, when you are having one that is starting to impact you. And again, it feels little and you're like, I feel silly for bringing this up. Again, you know your situation. So also use your own judgment, use your own discernment about, is this a casual betrayal or is this just an annoyance? There is a difference. But when you recognize, like, no, but this is something that is affecting me, it is making me resent them, it is making me want to pull myself back, it is making me feel like I am betraying myself to show up and do this thing for them. Recognize it, set the boundaries, focus on the healing so you can start reclaiming your power and rebuilding trust within your life, whether it's with self or whether it's with others. So, guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll have a new one for you in 2 weeks. Follow us on Instagram at She Wolf Alchemy. I mean, we started posting on TikTok, but TikTok still doing some like real funny stuff where we post and it shows our stuff to like 80 people only. And so we'll see. We'll see. But you can follow us on there. It's an experiment. We're trying. At She Wolf Alchemy podcast. And we ask wherever you're listening that you give us a like, you give us a review, and share it. And again, guys, we'll have a new episode for you in 2 weeks. Thanks and
Bye.
bye.